The crude birth rate is the number of live births per 1,000 people in a year. The UK's crude birth rate is 12.26 births per 1,000. Brazil's is 14.97 births per 1,000. And Mali's is 46.06 births per 1,000.
The crude death rate is the number of deaths per 1,000 people in a year. The UK's crude death rate is 9.33 per 1,000, Brazil is 6.51 per 1,000, and Mali is 13.55 per 1,000 people in a year.
Infant mortality rate is the number of infant deaths per 1,000 live births. The UK is 4.5 per 1,000, Brazil is 19.83 per 1,000, and Mali is 106.49 per 1,000.
Life expectancy is the average number of years to be lived by a person. UK's people live about 80.29 years old. Brazil's people live about 73.02 years old. Mali's people live about 54.55 years old.
Fecundity is the ability of a woman to conceive. The UK is about 1.9 births per woman, Brazil is 1.81 births per woman, and Mali is 6.16 births per woman.
Total fertility rate is the predicted number of births a woman will have as she passes through the fecund years. The UK has 1.94 births per woman, Brazil has 1.84 births per woman, and Mali has 6.85 births per woman. All of this factors in the economic development of countries.
Demography, the study of human population, talks about the 6.5 billion people living on the earth currently.
Geographers use demographic analysis to study the spatial distributions of humans and their movements. Demographers are experts in demography.
The size, composition, and growth of a country's population affects its well-being. Rapid increases in population in areas like the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa strain their infrastructures or support systems, including housing, food, supplies, education, and healthcare.
Scale of inquiry, or the size of geographic investigation, e.g. global, regional, or local, is important to demographic analysis. At the global level, demographers are looking at where the Earth's populations are growing the fastest and where they are expanding more slowly. Present trends show that populations are growing fastest in slower areas.
At the subglobal level, demographers analyze population trends within regions like continents, countries, or states. They are interested in discovering facts that only closer analysis can provide. Locally, demographers may look at different neighborhoods or towns to get a clearer picture of what is happening to a region.
This is the subglobal population accounting equation. It shows the number of people that's alive, the number of people that died, and the people that immigrated and emigrated.
Distribution of population is the pattern of people across the Earth's surface where they live. Throughout human history, people have been unevenly concentrated, clustering around sustaining resources such as bodies of water and in regions where people can farm.
This shows the uneven distribution of people among the countries, such as China having a large population.
Ecumene is the part of the Earth on which people can live. About 50% of people on the Earth live in cities, while the other half live in rural areas.
Cities are an example of ecumenes. About 50% of people on the Earth live in cities, while the other half lives in rural areas.
Some interesting population statistics are approximately 81% of the Earth's population lives in poor, less developed countries. Only 2 countries have more than 1 billion people. 1 in 3 of the Earth's people live in either India or China. Combined with the rest of Asia, nearly 1 in 2 of the Earth's people in Asia. Nearly 3 of every 5 people in the world live in Asia and Europe.
The largest concentration of people on the Earth is found in East Asia, such as China, Japan, Taiwan, and North and South Korea. Nearly 25% of all people live in this region. Most of China's population lives on the North China Plain to take advantage of the land that the Yellow River has made arable or fit for growing crops. Most East Asians are subsistence farmers.
The second largest concentration of humans is in South Asia, such as India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Currently, India's rate of natural increase is higher than China's. Thus, India is projected to overtake China by 2030 as the world's most heavily populated country. Most South Asians are subsistence farmers living on the arable lands surrounding the Indus and Ganges River.
The third largest concentration of people is in Europe, from the Atlantic to the Ural Mountains. This is highly related to Europe's climate and the coal deposits that largely facilitated the population explosion during the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s. In contrast to Asians, most Europeans are urban dwellers living in cities. While Europeans have the highest percentage of urban dwellers, Asia has the largest number of urban dwellers because of its population size.
Demographers use population pyramids, also known as age-sex structures, to evaluate the distribution of ages and genders in a given population. A group of people of the same age is known as a cohort. Each cohort is split between men and women on the pyramid. The wider the base of the pyramid, the higher the percentage of young people exists in the community. The more top-heavy the pyramid, the higher the percentage of elderly people. A population pyramid can also help predict future growth of populations. Because a woman typically has a baby when she is between the ages of 15 and 45, the more women in that age range, the higher the world's birth rates will be. Carrying capacity is the number of people the area can sustain or support. This number varies depending on a region's available technology, wealth, climate, and ability to bring in resources from other areas to support its people. Desalination plants help remove salt from ocean water and turn it into drinking water for its people. These innovative tactics have increased this region's carrying capacity. Overpopulation occurs when a region's population outgrows its carrying capacity, but that carrying capacity can be increased through global trade and communication.
Dependency ratio is a helpful tool in analyzing the workforce and age distribution in a country. People in a country aged 15 through 64 are considered non-dependent because they can support themselves through work. Dependents are usually people who are older or younger than the working group. They depend on the workers for their survivals. Dependents are usually the elderly and children. The dependency ratio shows the relationship between the dependents and non-dependents.
A graying population is related to an increasing dependency ratio. Rapid growth also increases the dependency ratio and is the reason dependency ratios in Africa are fairly high.
Over the last 3 centuries, the Earth has experienced a population explosion, a dramatic population increase. Currently, the global human population of nearly 6.5 billion is growing at an exponential rate, which means that there are more people that are added than the faster people are growing. Exponential growth is different from linear growth, which is a fixed growth. For example, if you trace the human population over time, in 1750, the population was about 700 million people. However, in just over 200 years, the population has grown to 6 billion people.
The first agricultural revolution empowered humans with the ability to domesticate crops and build stationary settlements through farming, rather than always hunting and gathering on the move. Thereafter, cities began to develop and the population began to grow at a faster speed. In the 1700s, the Industrial Revolution, which diffused from England, facilitated the growth of new technologies and industry. Alongside the Industrial Revolution was the Second Agricultural Revolution, in which improved fertilization and food storage technology was invented. This improved and increased the food supply, fostering population growth to meet the demands of the Industrial Revolution for more workers. Cities rapidly became overcrowded as people moved from farms to get factory jobs. Urban population boomed.
This graph shows the rapid population of people over the last 200 years. In response to the fast-growing urban areas and an increasing population, British theorist Thomas Malthus wrote in his 1798 publication an essay on the principle of population that the world's population growth would outpace its carrying capacity. He argued that the population Global population was growing geometrically while its food supply was only growing arithmetically. That is, that the population was growing faster than the food supply. He advocated for birth control and celibacy, which he called positive checks. He also warned of negative checks such as wars, starvation, and diseases.
Karl Marx wrote that the problem was not population growth rates but the unequal distribution of resources and wages. Bossera wrote another theory that contrasted with both Malthus and Marx. She believed that the overpopulation problem could be slowed by increasing the number of subsistence farms.
Neo-Malthusians apply some ideas in the Malthusian theory. The Neo-Malthusians' idea of sustainable development hinges on the Malthusian idea that even population growth must reach a sustainable level within carrying capacity. These arguments are more regional rather than global. In fact, for economic and technological reasons, different regions can support different levels of populations. As mentioned earlier, many of the highest population growth rates are occurring in poorer regions with lower carrying capacities.
By the 1820s, the human population reached 1 billion. The United Nations devised growth scenarios to predict population growth. In its low growth scenario, the United Nations predicts that the Earth's population will begin declining, reach 7.5 billion by 2050, and 5.1 billion by 2100. In contrast, its high growth scenario predicts a global population of 11 billion in 2050 and 16 billion in 2100. The United Nations medium growth scenario, the one most accepted by demographers, predicts 9 billion by 2050 and 9.5 billion in 2100.
Among the negative checks on population growth that have occurred throughout world history are the Black Plague of the 1300s in Europe, which decimated 40% of the European population and killed 13 million Chinese. The Irish potato famine, which killed nearly 1 in 2 Irish people and caused massive immigration from Ireland, and HIV/AIDS, which since the 1980s has risen to be a pandemic, a disease affecting very large amounts of area and people, often at a global scale.
In 2005, nearly 39 million people were living with HIV and nearly 3 million people died from AIDS. Overall, the global infection rate is believed to have peaked in the 1990s, but the number of people with HIV is growing because of population growth and increased life expectancy resulting from better medicine for AIDS patients. In sub-Saharan Africa, the area most acutely affected by AIDS, some epidemics are still expanding. Nearly 19% of all adults there are infected. Africa is the global epicenter or region at the center of impact of the AIDS pandemic. China, also facing an AIDS epidemic, is projected to see nearly 11 million infections by 2010. Death rates in sub-Saharan African countries are higher because of AIDS-related death.
Replacement level fertility. A TFR of 2.1 is considered replacement level fertility, meaning that parents will produce the number of children needed to replace themselves. This leads to zero population growth, when the population size remains the same from year to year. For this to happen, the number of births minus the number of deaths must equal zero. Such a situation in a rate of natural increase of zero.
Europe is a good example of zero population growth, as shown in the population pyramid above.
The rate of national increase affects the country's doubling time, or the number of years it will take for the country to double in population size.
Fertility is the reproductive behavior of a population, whereas mortality is related to death. Fertility is affected by several key factors. Biologically, the most important factor affecting fertility is the age of the reproductive population. For a woman, fecundity usually begins around 15 years of age and terminates in the mid-40s. For males, reproductive behavior peaks at about age 20, but the termination age is undetermined.
Factors affecting fertility. A population's diet and nutritional intake also has an impact on fertility. Famine reduces fertility rates, economic factors also play a role in shaping fertility. Industrialization tends to reduce fertility rates because family moves from being rural farmers to city dwellers. Children are needed on the farm to help, but they are expensive in the cities. Sociocultural factors such as when men and women can marry also affect fertility patterns. If a culture believes men and women should marry young, it is encouraging higher fertility rates. The simple fact is that the couple that is together longer has more time to have babies. Such pro-nationalist population policies encourage families to have more children. Arithmetic density, also called population density, is the total number of people divided by the total land area. On the other hand, physiological density is the number of people per unit of arable land. Finally, agricultural density is the number of farmers per unit of arable land. All of these densities factors in determining the economic development of countries. I mean, save it.